Jake Morrison sat in his small office on Earth, staring at the message that had just arrived. The words on the screen seemed impossible. After 50 years of trying to contact alien civilizations, someone had finally answered. The Galactic Council wanted to meet with humanity. He read the message again. The translation was perfect, which scared him a little. These aliens understood human language better than humans understood theirs. The message was simple and direct. Earth would send one representative to address the council. They would meet at a space station called Nexus Prime in 3 weeks. Jake had been Earth's top diplomat for 20 years. He had solved conflicts between nations that seemed impossible to fix. But this was different. This was about representing all of humanity to beings from across the galaxy. The journey to Nexus Prime took 2 weeks aboard the UES Horizon, Earth's most advanced spaceship. Jake brought only 2 people with him. Katie Wells was his assistant, a smart woman who had worked with him for 5 years. Ben Carter was their security chief, a former soldier who never smiled but always got the job done. As they approached the space station, Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. Nexus Prime was massive. It looked like a small moon made of metal and glass with thousands of ships docked around it. Each ship was different. Some looked like crystals that grew in space. Others were dark and angular like weapons. A few seemed to be made of pure energy, shifting and flowing like liquid light. "Look at that," Katie whispered, pointing at a ship that was easily 10 times bigger than their own. "How do they even build something that size?" Ben checked his weapons, for the 3rd time. "Doesn't matter how big their ships are, we're here to talk, not fight." Jake nodded, but he felt nervous. Earth's technology suddenly seemed very small and primitive compared to what he was seeing. The docking process was smooth. As soon as they connected to the station, Jake felt the difference. The artificial gravity was stronger than Earth's. The air tasted different, with a metallic tang that made his nose itch. Strange sounds echoed through the corridors, clicks, hums, and noises he couldn't identify. Their escort was a tall, thin alien with blue skin and 4 arms. It spoke through a device that translated its words into perfect English. "Welcome to Nexus Prime, human delegation. I am Guide Kellen. Please follow me to the council chamber." The walk took almost an hour. The corridors were huge, designed for creatures much larger than humans. Jake saw dozens of different alien species along the way. Some walked on legs, like humans. Others floated or crawled or moved in ways that hurt his eyes to watch. A few looked almost human, while others were so strange he couldn't tell which end was the head. Most of them stopped to stare at the human delegation. Jake couldn't read their expressions, but he didn't think they looked friendly. The council chamber was the largest room Jake had ever seen. It was shaped like a giant bowl, with thousands of seats arranged in circles going up and up until they disappeared in the shadows near the ceiling. Each section was different, built for different types of aliens. Some seats were filled with water. Others glowed with heat or crackled with electricity. Jake and his team were led to a small platform in the center of the chamber. 3 simple chairs sat on the platform, looking tiny and out of place. Above them, thousands of alien beings looked down with eyes, sensors, and things Jake couldn't identify. A voice boomed through the chamber, coming from everywhere at once. The translation device in Jake's ear turned the alien words into English. "The Council recognizes the delegation from the planet Earth. You may be seated." As Jake sat down, he looked around the chamber. The closest seats were occupied by beings that looked like living crystals, their bodies glowing with soft light. These had to be the Zephyrians, the ones who seemed to be in charge. Behind them sat insect-like creatures with shiny black shells and too many eyes. In another section, energy beings floated in glass containers, their forms shifting like colored smoke. One of the crystal beings stood up. It was at least 3 meters tall, with a voice like wind chimes. "I am Prime Counselor Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. The Council has gathered to address the situation regarding your species." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. This didn't sound like a welcome ceremony. "We have been watching your world for some time," Vextar continued. Your species has shown concerning patterns of behavior. Today we will discuss whether humanity should be allowed to continue its expansion into space, or whether your solar system should be placed under quarantine for the safety of galactic civilization. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. This wasn't a meeting. It was a trial. Before he could respond, another alien stood up. This one looked like a giant lizard walking on two legs, with scales that reflected the chamber's lights. I am Counselor Thane of the Drekmari Republic. We have prepared evidence of human barbarism that the Council must consider. A massive holographic display appeared above the chamber. Images of Earth filled the air, but not the beautiful images Jake had hoped to show. These were pictures of war, pollution, and destruction. Bombs exploding, cities burning, oceans filled with garbage, animals going extinct. Observe, Thane said, his voice full of disgust. In less than 100 rotations, humans have poisoned their own world. They fight constant wars over resources, territory, and ideas. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, and they have come close to using them multiple times. More aliens began to speak. Each one presented more evidence of human failures. An aquatic species showed images of polluted rivers and dead fish. A peaceful-looking race displayed statistics about human violence and crime. A group of plant-like beings talked about deforestation and habitat destruction. Jake tried to speak several times, but no one would listen. The aliens were too busy listing humanity's crimes. They laughed at human technology, calling it primitive and dangerous. They mocked human lifespans, saying humans were too short-lived to make wise decisions. They criticized human governments, pointing out every war, every mistake, every failure in human history. Look at their so-called leaders, one alien said, showing images of politicians arguing. They cannot even agree among themselves. How can they be trusted in galactic affairs? Another alien, this one looking like a giant jellyfish, pulsed with different colors as it spoke. Their expansion into space is chaotic and aggressive. They claim territory without permission. They exploit resources without regard for consequences. They are like a virus, spreading destruction wherever they go. The mockery continued for hours. Jake felt his anger growing with each insult, each laugh, each dismissive comment about his species. Katie reached over and touched his arm, trying to calm him down. Ben sat perfectly still, but Jake could see the tension in his shoulders. Finally, Counselor Thane stood up again. His yellow eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he delivered what he clearly thought was the final blow. These creatures have existed for mere thousands of years and already show signs of self-destruction. They contribute nothing to galactic civilization except violence and chaos. They are barely evolved primates with nuclear weapons. He paused, letting his words echo through the chamber. We propose immediate quarantine of their entire solar system to protect the galaxy from their inevitable self-destruction and their dangerous expansion. The chamber erupted in agreement. Thousands of alien voices joined together in approval. Some pounded seats or appendages. Others flashed lights or made sounds that the translator couldn't handle. Jake felt something snap inside him. All the anger, all the frustration, all the pride he felt for his species came together in a moment of crystal clarity. These aliens thought they knew humanity. They thought they understood what humans were capable of. They were wrong. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the platform. The sound was small in the massive chamber, but somehow it cut through the noise. Katie grabbed his arm, whispering urgently that he should wait for permission to speak. But Jake was done waiting. The chamber began to quiet as aliens noticed the human standing in the center of their circle. Jake looked up at the thousands of faces, sensors, and alien features staring down at him. His heart was pounding, but his voice was perfectly steady when he spoke. You want to talk about barbarism? Jake's voice cut through the alien chatter like a knife through silk. The massive chamber fell silent so quickly that the sudden quiet was almost painful. Thousands of alien beings stared down at the lone human standing on the small platform. Dear, want to talk about barbarism? Jake repeated, his words echoing in the vast space. Let me tell you about barbarism. He pulled out his data pad, a simple human device that looked like a child's toy compared to the advanced technology surrounding him. But when he activated it, holographic displays filled the air above the chamber. The images were clear and bright, impossible to ignore. "This is the Kepler station disaster of 2387, Jake said, his voice steady and calm. "A mining operation that went wrong. 17 different species were trapped in collapsing tunnels deep underground. The situation was desperate. The hologram showed a massive space station built into an asteroid. Parts of it were crushed and twisted. Emergency lights flashed red across the structure. Jake could see alien faces in the crowd above him, beginning to recognize the images. The Zephyrian Empire was contacted first," Jake continued, looking directly at Prime Counselor Vextar. "Your response was that a rescue operation would be economically unfeasible. The cost was too high for the number of lives that might be saved." Vextar's crystal body flickered, but he said nothing. Jake turned to another section of the chamber. The Hive Collective ran their calculations. They determined that the survival probability was only 12%. Based on those numbers, they withdrew their ships and declared the situation hopeless. The insect-like beings in that section made clicking sounds, but none of them spoke up to defend their decision. 67 hours after the disaster began, human ships arrived at Kepler Station. The hologram changed to show 3 battered human vessels approaching the damaged station. They were small compared to the alien ships that had already left the area. "We didn't run probability calculations. We didn't check if it was economically feasible. We just started digging." A new figure appeared in the hologram. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of her ship, her gray hair pulled back and her face determined. Her voice filled the chamber as Jake played the recording. "I don't care if it takes everything we have," Admiral Hayes said. "I don't care if the odds are against us. No one gets left behind, no one." Jake watched the alien faces as the hologram showed human rescue teams working around the clock. They dug through collapsed tunnels with their bare hands when their machines broke down. They shared their oxygen with trapped aliens even when their own supplies ran low. They worked for 6 days straight without sleep. 43 aliens were pulled out alive, Jake said. The Zephyrians had calculated that maybe 8 would survive. The Hive Collective said 12% meant maybe 6 or 7. Humans saved 43 because we didn't stop to count the cost. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the energy beings had stopped their constant humming. Jake activated another file. The Proxima Plague of 2390, a disease that killed within hours and spread through the air. The infected colonies were placed under strict quarantine. Every civilized species agreed that approaching the quarantine zone was suicide. New images filled the air. Human medical teams in white protective suits walking into buildings marked with biohazard symbols. Dr. Amy Chen appeared in the recording, checking her equipment before entering a hospital full of dying aliens. "These people are going to die if we don't try," Dr. Chen said to her team. "Yes, we might die too, but they will definitely die if we do nothing. I can live with maybe dying. I can't live with definitely letting them die." Jake's voice grew stronger. Human medical teams rushed into those quarantine zones while other species maintained safe distances and wished them luck. We lost 37 doctors and nurses to that plague, but we saved over 2,000 alien lives. He pulled up another file. The hologram showed a massive space storm, with lightning made of pure energy tearing through space. The Void Storm evacuations. When the Crimson Nebula started collapsing, it threatened to destroy the Altarian homeworld. The storm was so violent that most ships couldn't even get close. Captain Ryan Foster appeared in the recording. He was young for a ship captain, maybe 30 years old with steady hands and calm eyes. "We know it's dangerous," he told his crew. "We know we might not make it back. But there are 3 million people down there who will die if we don't try. Anyone who wants to leave can take the escape pods now. No shame in that." The hologram showed his crew's response. Not a single person left their post. Captain Foster flew his ship directly into a cosmic storm that was tearing apart reality itself, Jake said. His ship was damaged so badly that it could barely fly, but he and his crew evacuated every single Altarian from their homeworld before the planet was destroyed. Jake paused and looked around the chamber. The aliens who had been mocking humanity just hours before now sat in uncomfortable silence. "You call us barbaric," Jake said, his voice rising for the first time. "But when disasters strike, when plagues spread, when storms threaten entire worlds, who do you think arrives first? Not the mighty Zephyrian fleet with their economic calculations, not the wise void speakers with their careful planning. It's always the same answer. Humans." He activated another hologram. This one showed a research station in deep space, its hull cracked and atmosphere leaking into the void. Research Station Omega, a containment breach that would have released a deadly virus into space. The automated systems failed. Someone had to go in manually and seal the breach from the inside. Dr. Amy Chen appeared again, this time in a different uniform. Her face was older now, more tired, but her eyes still held the same determination Jake had seen in the plague recordings. "The radiation levels are too high," someone said to her in the recording. "Whoever goes in there won't come back." "Out," Dr. Chen smiled sadly. "Then I guess it's a good thing I volunteer. Tell my family I chose this. Tell them someone had to stay and I was honored to be that someone." The recording showed Dr. Chen walking into the contaminated section of the station. Her final transmission echoed through the council chamber. "Breach sealed. Station is secure. Tell my family I love them." Jake's voice dropped to almost a whisper, forcing the massive chamber to strain to hear him. "You want to know what's really different about humans? We have a word that doesn't exist in any of your languages. Sacrifice. Not tactical sacrifice, for strategic advantage. Not calculated sacrifice for logical outcomes. Pure sacrifice because it's the right thing to do." He looked up at Counselor Thane, the reptilian alien who had called humans barely evolved primates. "You say we contribute nothing but violence and chaos. Let me ask you something, Counselor. When was the last time your species risked everything to save strangers? When was the last time you chose to help someone even when it meant you might die?" Thane's yellow eyes flickered, but he didn't answer. Jake activated one final hologram. It showed hundreds of scenes from across the galaxy. Human ships arriving at disaster sites, human doctors treating alien patients, human engineers fixing alien technology, human teachers sharing knowledge with alien students. "This is what you're really afraid of," Jake said, his voice now carrying the authority of someone who had seen the truth. "You're not afraid of us because we're barbaric. You're afraid because we're effective. Every species in this chamber has some natural advantage. Zephyrians live for thousands of years. The hive thinks with one mind. Void speakers can manipulate energy itself." He spread his arms wide, gesturing to the images floating above them. "Humans have one advantage that terrifies you. We adapt. We don't just survive in hostile environments. We thrive in them. We don't just solve problems, we turn them into opportunities, and most importantly, we don't just help our own kind. We help everyone." The chamber remained silent. Jake could see alien representatives looking at each other, uncertain for the first time since the session had begun. "You want to quarantine us," Jake said, his voice carrying across the vast space. "You want to lock us away because you're afraid of what happens when humans get involved. Change, real change. The kind that makes your ancient hierarchies and comfortable supremacies irrelevant." He looked directly at Prime Counselor Vextar. "The question isn't whether humanity deserves a place in galactic civilization. The question is whether galactic civilization deserves humanity's help. Because like it or not, we're going to keep showing up every time someone needs saving. That's just who we are." Jake sat back down, his presentation complete. The silence in the chamber stretched on, broken only by the quiet hum of alien technology and the sound of his own heartbeat in his ears. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Jake could hear his own breathing in the vast chamber. Thousands of alien eyes, sensors, and unidentifiable organs stared down at him. He had said his piece. Now he had to wait for their response. Finally, Jake stood up again. The movement sent a ripple of attention through the chamber. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before. But somehow, it carried even more weight. "You're not afraid of us because we're barbaric," he said, looking slowly around the circle of alien faces. "You're afraid because we're effective. He activated his datapad once more. New images filled the air above the chamber, but these were different from the rescue scenes he had shown before. These images showed something that made several alien representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. Every species in this chamber has some natural advantage, Jake continued. Zephyrians live for thousands of years, giving you wisdom and patience. The Hive Collective thinks as one mind, making you incredibly efficient. Void speakers can manipulate pure energy, making you powerful beyond measure. The images changed to show human settlements across the galaxy, but these weren't the military bases or mining operations the Council had expected. These were communities, places where humans and aliens lived and worked together. Humans have one advantage that terrifies you, Jake said. We adapt. We don't just survive in hostile environments. We thrive in them. We don't just solve problems, we turn them into opportunities. And most importantly, we don't replace what already exists. We make it better. The first image showed a farming colony called New Geneva. Human farmers worked side by side with tall, plant-like aliens called Sylvans. The crops growing in their fields were unlike anything found on Earth or the Sylvan homeworld. New Geneva colony, Jake explained. Human farmers and Sylvan botanists working together. Separately, human agriculture could feed maybe 100 people per square kilometer. Sylvan methods could support maybe 50. Together, they're feeding 340 people per square kilometer. The crops are more nutritious, more resistant to disease, and they actually improve the soil instead of depleting it. Several alien representatives leaned forward in their seats. This was not what they had expected to hear. Jake showed them another image. This one was of a massive space station with ships coming and going constantly. The ships were strange combinations of human and alien technology, sleeker and more efficient than anything either species could build alone. Port Liberty, Jake said. Human engineers working with mechanoid artificers. Separately, human ships are tough but slow. Mechanoid vessels are fast but fragile. Together, they're building ships that outperform anything in your fleets. And they're sharing the designs with everyone who asks. A buzz of conversation started in the mechanoid section of the chamber. Jake could see them talking rapidly among themselves, their metal heads clicking together as they communicated. Haven Station, Jake continued, showing an image of a medical facility. Human doctors in white coats worked alongside floating ethereal beings that glowed with soft light. Human doctors and ethereal healers have eliminated 17 diseases that were previously incurable. They're not hoarding the cures. They're teaching them to anyone who wants to learn. The images kept coming. Research stations where human scientists worked with alien researchers to solve problems neither could handle alone. Trade posts where human merchants and alien traders created new forms of commerce that benefited everyone. Schools where human teachers and alien educators shared knowledge across species barriers. This is what you're really afraid of, Jake said, his voice growing stronger. Change. Real change. The kind that makes your ancient hierarchies and your comfortable supremacies irrelevant. He pulled up a recording from the recent Beta Centauri negotiations. Captain Maria Santos appeared in the hologram, sitting across from a table of mixed alien and human delegates. She was a small woman with dark hair and kind eyes, but her voice carried absolute authority. "We're not here to conquer," Captain Santos said in the recording. "We're not here to replace your systems or your governments or your way of life. We're here to build something better together." Jake paused the recording and looked directly at Prime Counselor Vextar. 6 months ago, your traders and our merchants were competing for the same routes, fighting over the same resources. Captain Santos suggested something radical. Instead of competing, why not cooperate? Instead of fighting over limited resources, why not find new ones together? The recording continued to show the negotiations. Jake watched alien faces in the chamber as they saw their own representatives working with humans to create trade agreements that benefited everyone involved. The result? Jake said. Trade volume increased by 400%. Resource conflicts dropped to 0, and every species involved is now wealthier and more secure than they were before. But then Jake's expression grew darker. His next words carried a weight that made the entire chamber go completely silent. You want to quarantine us because you know what happens when humans get involved. Your comfortable order gets disrupted. Your ancient power structures start to crumble, not because we destroy them, but because we show everyone there's a better way. He activated a new hologram, and this one made several alien representatives gasp in recognition. It showed a battle scene from space, but it wasn't humans fighting aliens. It was humans and aliens fighting together against something else entirely. 6 months ago, the Shadow Fleet broke through from another dimension, Jake said. Ships made of pure darkness that could phase in and out of reality. They attacked outer colonies without warning, without mercy. Your combined forces fought them for 3 weeks. The battle scenes were horrific. Alien ships exploded in balls of fire as shadow vessels materialized inside them. Entire colonies went dark as the Shadow Fleet consumed everything in their path. Every engagement was a defeat, Jake continued. The Shadow Fleet was too fast, too unpredictable. Your admirals called for retreat. Your strategists said the outer colonies were lost. Your politicians started talking about building defensive lines closer to your homeworlds. The hologram showed alien fleets pulling back, abandoning the outer colonies to their fate. Jake could see shame on some of the alien faces watching from the chamber. Then Commander Jack Phillips suggested something that your military experts called insane, Jake said. If the Shadow Fleet could phase in and out of reality through dimensional portals, why not ram our ships directly into those portals and see what happened? A new figure appeared in the hologram. Commander Phillips was a tall man with graying hair and scars on his face from previous battles. He stood on the bridge of his ship, surrounded by both human and alien crew members. I know it sounds crazy, Commander Phillips said in the recording. We don't know what's on the other side of those portals. We don't know if our ships can survive the transition, but we know what happens if we do nothing. Everyone dies. Jake watched the alien faces as the recording showed mixed crews volunteering for what everyone thought was a suicide mission. Humans and Drekmari working side by side. Zephyrians and mechanoids sharing the same stations. Species that had never trusted each other suddenly willing to die together. The breakthrough came when Lieutenant Sarah Kim and her co-pilot Skarthak discovered that the Shadow Fleet's command ship existed partially in both dimensions, Jake said. It could be destroyed, but only by someone willing to fly directly into the dimensional rift. The final battle scene played out above the chamber. Jake could see tears in some of the alien eyes as they watched Lieutenant Kim and the Drakmari warrior Skarthak pilot their damaged fighter straight into the heart of the Shadow Fleet. The war ended when a human pilot and a Drakmari warrior decided that saving the galaxy was worth dying for, Jake said quietly. Not because their computers calculated it was the optimal strategy, not because their leaders ordered them to do it, because they chose to believe in something bigger than themselves. The hologram faded, leaving the chamber in darkness except for the ambient light from various alien technologies. Jake stood in the center of it all, looking up at thousands of alien faces that no longer showed mockery or contempt. You called us barely evolved primates, Jake said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. But when the galaxy was threatened, it was a human and a Drakmari who saved everyone. When your people were trapped and dying, it was humans who came to dig them out. When diseases spread and storms raged and disaster struck, it was always the same species that showed up first. He paused, letting his words sink in. The question isn't whether humanity deserves a place in galactic civilization, Jake said. The question is whether galactic civilization can afford to keep us out. Because we're going to keep helping. We're going to keep saving people. We're going to keep showing up when everyone else has given up. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Jake sat back down, his final words echoing in the silent chamber. The presentation was over. Now came the hardest part. Waiting for the galaxy to decide if humanity was worth accepting. The silence in the chamber lasted for what felt like forever. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Katie sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Ben remained perfectly still, but Jake could see the tension in his shoulders. Thousands of alien beings stared down at them from the massive circular tiers. Finally, Prime Counselor Vextar's crystalline form began to glow brighter. His voice, when it came, carried none of the arrogance Jake had heard earlier. "Ambassador Morrison?" Vextar said slowly. "These records you have shown us, the battles, the rescues, the cooperation between species, are they all authentic?" Jake stood up again, his legs feeling shaky after sitting for so long. "Every single one, Prime. Counselor. Verified by your own monitoring systems. Your intelligence networks have been watching us for decades. You know these events happened." A murmur ran through the chamber. Aliens turned to each other, speaking in dozens of different languages. The translation devices struggled to keep up with all the conversations happening at once. Then something unexpected happened. Counselor Thane, the same Drakmari who had called humans barely evolved primates, rose slowly from his seat. His reptilian features were hard to read, but his voice carried emotions that made several aliens in the chamber gasp. Thane started, then stopped. He looked down at Jake with his yellow eyes, and for the first time, Jake saw something other than contempt in them. "I served alongside Lieutenant Sarah Kim in the final battle against the Shadow Fleet." The chamber went completely silent again. This was not something anyone had expected to hear. "I was in the fighter wing that followed her into the dimensional rift," Thane continued, his voice growing stronger. "I saw her die saving my homeworld. I saw her sacrifice herself for people she had never met, including members of my own family." Thane's claws clicked against his seat as he gripped it tightly. "I came here today prepared to condemn her species. I had speeches ready about human violence and human chaos. I had evidence of human wars and human mistakes." He paused, looking around the chamber at his fellow council members. "I find myself ashamed," Thane said quietly. "How can I condemn the species that gave us Lieutenant Sarah Kim? How can I call barbaric the people who taught my own warriors what true courage looks like?" Jake felt his throat tighten. He had not expected this. One by one, other alien representatives began to stand. A member of the Aquatic Federation rose from her water-filled seat, her gills fluttering as she spoke. "Human dive teams helped evacuate our underwater cities during the tidal wars," she said. "They worked in crushing depths that should have killed them. Many of them did die. But they saved over 50,000 of our people." A delegate from the Peaceful Dominion stood next. "Human negotiators ended the century war between our people and the Iron Clans. They spent 3 years in constant talks, sleeping only a few hours each night, eating barely enough to survive. When the peace treaty was finally signed, Ambassador Robert Chen collapsed from exhaustion. He spent 2 weeks in our hospitals, but he refused to leave until every detail was settled." More and more aliens began to speak. Each one had a story about humans who had helped them, saved them, or simply treated them with kindness when no one else would. But it was the voice that came next that shocked everyone in the chamber into complete silence. Silent speaker Zeknor of the Void Collective rarely spoke during council sessions. The ancient energy being was older than most civilizations, and when it did communicate, its words carried enormous weight. Now its translated thoughts filled the chamber like thunder. "We have observed humanity for 12 cycles." Zeknor's voice echoed from everywhere at once. "We expected them to follow the pattern of all emerging civilizations: initial expansion, resource competition, eventual stagnation or self-destruction. The ancient being's form shifted and pulsed with different colors as it continued. Instead, we witnessed something unprecedented in our long existence. Humans do not seek to dominate existing order. They seek to improve it. This is unique." Even Prime Counselor Vexitar seemed impressed by Zeknor's words. The Void Collective was older than the Zephyrian Empire, older than most species in the galaxy. Their opinion mattered. "In all our observations," Zeknor continued, "we have never seen a species that consistently prioritizes the welfare of others over their own survival. This behavior should be evolutionarily impossible, yet humans demonstrate it repeatedly." Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. He had spent hours defending his species, but hearing these words from beings who had initially mocked humanity was overwhelming. Prime Counselor Vextar stood up, his crystal body pulsing with what Jake had learned was Zephyrian deep thought. "The Council has made an error in judgment," he said formally. "We based our evaluation on surface observations rather than deeper understanding." The massive chamber buzzed with conversation as aliens discussed this unprecedented admission from the Council's leader. "However," Vextar continued, raising his voice to restore quiet, "the question before us remains. What is humanity's place in galactic civilization?" Jake felt his heart racing. This was the moment everything had been building toward. "If I may, Prime Counselor," Jake said, stepping forward. "We didn't come here seeking your approval or your fear. We came seeking partnership." He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many alien representatives as possible. "Humanity doesn't want to join your council as subjects or conquerors. We want to join as equals, bringing our own unique strengths to benefit everyone. We want to help solve problems that have gone unsolved for centuries. We want to explore the galaxy together, discover new worlds together, face new challenges together." Jake's voice grew stronger as he continued. "You're right that humans bring change. But change doesn't have to mean destruction. Change can mean growth, improvement, hope for a better future." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Alien representatives argued back and forth about the risks and benefits of accepting humanity into galactic civilization. Some worried about human unpredictability. Others pointed to the evidence of human cooperation and sacrifice. When the vote finally came, it was unlike anything in Council history. The proposal wasn't just about whether to quarantine humanity or accept them. It was about fundamentally changing how the Galactic Council operated. The final vote was closer than anyone expected. Out of over 200 species represented in the chamber, the decision passed by only 7 votes. Humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with one unprecedented condition. Any species facing an impossible problem, any civilization dealing with a crisis they couldn't solve alone, could formally request human assistance, and humanity would be expected to respond just as they always had. As the session ended and aliens began filing out of the chamber, many stopped to speak with Jake. Some apologized for their initial hostility. Others asked questions about human, culture, and technology. A few even invited him to visit their homeworlds. Katie finally spoke up as they prepared to leave Nexus Prime. "How did you know it would work? How did you know they would listen?" Jake looked out through the massive viewport at the ships from dozens of worlds now flying in formation with human vessels. For the first time in hours, he smiled. "I didn't know it would work," he admitted. "But I knew we had to try. That's what makes us human. We don't calculate whether hope is logical or whether courage makes sense. We just hope, and then we act on that hope." As the UES Horizon prepared to depart for Earth, Jake's communication system lit up with incoming messages. Distress calls from outer colonies, research requests from alien scientists, diplomatic invitations from species that had never spoken to humans before, trade proposals, exploration partnerships, and requests for help with problems that had seemed impossible to solve. Jake looked at the flood of messages and laughed. "Katie, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're going to need bigger ships and a lot more diplomats." "What should I tell them about the mission?" Katie asked. Jake watched through the viewport as more alien ships joined their convoy, species that had been enemies for centuries now flying side by side under human guidance. "Tell them we're not coming home alone," Jake said. "Tell them the galaxy wants to meet humanity properly this time. And tell them to get ready, because we're about to become very busy." The UES Horizon turned toward Earth, followed by the largest, peaceful fleet in galactic history. Behind them, Nexus Prime continued to receive distress calls, research requests, and pleas for help from across the galaxy. And for each one, the answer was the same. Send it to the humans. They'll find a way. Jake Morrison had come to the Galactic Council expecting to defend humanity's right to exist in space. Instead, he had convinced the galaxy that they needed humanity's help to survive. It was, he thought, a very human way to solve an impossible problem.